Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I'm here talking with the team from Outer Loop Games and about their new game, Thirsty Suitors. I'm here with Ika, Megna, and Sunny. I hopefully got everyone's name correctly. And to kick things off, Ika, what is Thirsty Suitors for people who have not yet seen the magnificent trailer that you have out there? How do you describe it to people?
It's a game about disappointing your parents, fighting your exes, and eating lots of food and finding yourself. But mechanically, it's like a RPG with a narrative story and skateboarding and turn-based combat and cooking, plus a bunch of other things in between that.
So it is all of these things. It is a culmination, but it's also, we're getting a look into a culture that not a lot of people have, necessarily experienced, or especially we haven't seen a lot in video games, which I think is a huge deal. Of Megna, you were the lead writer for this. Like, what is that culture, and how do you stay true to that voice when creating a game like this?
So I think actually, what is this culture? It's huge and complex and really nuanced, and I don't think in any way we're attempting to say this is Indian culture. This isn't just about it isn't actually just about South Asians. Like, everyone on the team, I think we have like such a mix of immigrant backgrounds. My background's Indian, but I'm sort of British Indian. Ika's Sri Lankan and lives in America. Jala, our main character, is kind of Sri Lankan, Indian, American, living in the Pacific Northwest. So like, that's already like this huge kind of mix melting pot. So I think really our approach was to want to say something kind of true to diaspora kids and immigrant kids, living now, even though our game is kind of set in a kind of fictionalized 90s. And we wanted elements to feel really true and living and authentic and true to, I think, the fundamental experiences of South Asianness, but not be so worried about, authenticity in a in a strangling way. I used to, like, a lot of the games I worked on are like deeply researched historical fictions where we really want to be absolutely present in this moment in time. But so much of this game, I think, is about like invention and fantasy. And this is a joyous immigrant fantasy. So,
how do you create a story that that sort of like does straddle like both of the sides, that you are creating a world that is trying to stay true to the roots, but still something that is creative and, like you said, sort of a fantasy that sort of like reaches out to a broader audience? Like, how do you sort of like cut that down the middle, or like how do you straddle both sides of it? Like, what are some of the pillars that you focus on when creating this sort of world?
So I'm gonna give you my answer to that, and I think that's specificity, and I think you get through the universal always through a sense of specificity. And I think, whenever on the team we've been weighted down by this kind of this feeling of the burden of representation and the pressure of wanting to do right by our audience that's really underserved, or feeling as though we need to be all things to all people. I think that's so kind of inimical to real creativity and humanity. And the way we kind of get past that is by trying to tell this particular story really well. I mean, but I think, more broadly, if you ask Eka about his relationship with his parents and his feelings about growing up as an immigrant, and if you ask Sunny about them, and if you ask me about them, I think, there will be so many similarities, but so many differences as well. And I think all of those like binaries and all of these categories absolutely disappear the closer you get to to an individual, to a human. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, and we talk about this weekly as we're developing the story and doing the narrative of, because this game is particularly about a character named Jala who's returning home to her small town in Washington called Timber Hills after years of being away from her parents and her exes and her friends, and she's kind of left a mess, and the game is about her repairing all that. And her ex is wanting to have some closure of their own, and this is how sort of the battles and the confrontation happens. But we always kind of frame it as we're not trying to represent all of South Asia or all of immigrants in the U.S. It's just like there's a specific story we're trying to tell with Jala, and there's certain elements that make sense and certain things don't. And we always try to kind of, every time, like Megan was saying, every time we feel like the burden of, are we doing enough, or is there enough representation in this game? It's like, well, what is the best thing for the story and for the game, and that's what we focus on.
Sunny, like I know as working in the game design, looking at like what you're doing in the game, like how are the moment to moment sort of like telling the story? Like obviously we have this bigger arching story that we're going into, but like what are some of the things that people can expect to do into the game, and how does that sort of like feed into the larger story?
I think that there's a little bit of narrative sprinkled around in all the little parts of the game, because of course, you got the cooking, you got the skating, you got the battles, and in all of those there's always a sense of conversation. Specifically in like the cooking sections, it's a space in which Jala can talk to her mum and her dad and kind of reconcile her relationship with them, but at the same time it provides an item for her to use in a battle against one of her exes. So you learn all these small things about a culture that some people may have never experienced. You learn all these small things about Jala, you learn all these small things about Timber Hills that are just kind of like peppered in there in like small little bits. And I feel like that helps carry the message throughout, especially with a collection of, gameplay items that are kind of different from each other, but they all come together within that narrative wrapping.
Cooking, I feel like, is such a important part to a lot of people, both culturally, both through family, coming together. What in the game, as you're sort of putting it together, where you're like, we have to make this, we have to create this, because I remember making this when I was young, or this is a family affair, or this is something that brings people together. Like what is it about cooking? Like what to you brings you warmth when you're that you had to include within the game?
Before these guys answer, I'm just gonna rat them out and say there's like a cooking channel in our Slack, in the How to Do Slack, where all of them post pictures of food they've cooked, and I mostly get to salivate over them. But okay,
you posted some of your own.
Yeah, occasionally, but like there's some deep intimidation there. I just wanted to rat them out, and now they have to.
Yeah, I think the cooking was always going to be a big component. I mean, cooking was a big component in our last game, Falcon Age 2. But like for me, it's like I love cooking, and more recently, my mom moved back from Sri Lanka back home, so I've been like spending more time with her and learning her dishes. And of course, when you cook with your parents, or at least for I think our parents, we've talked about this. There's no recipe. She's just like, oh, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I try to follow it. And it never is ever as good as the way my mom makes it. Yeah, they're lying.
They're lying. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, see, they're just concerned that if you learn how to make the perfect dish, that you won't need them anymore. And so they have to put a slight lie.
Absolutely it, But on the other hand, I'm like, Mom, at some point, God forbid, at some point, it's going to be me who has to carry on these traditions. So you better pass these things on sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so I made little videos with my mom. Yeah, I made little videos with my mom just to like have those moments, but also just to kind of like I'm just kind of watch what she's doing, and just document it.
Set up a spy camera. Like
Yeah.
that's what we need. Like we need a full conspiracy, like CIA level operation to figure out what goes into these dishes.
Yeah.
And definitely some special spice in there somewhere that we don't know about.
Yeah. I think probably all of us when we were cooking with our parents is that there's a moment where I can feel like I can ask her questions without her being defensive or don't want her to talk about certain things. My mom is not. I guess I'm the same way. Not very good about like trying to get into like specifics of historical things, and so with cooking, she kind of lets her guard down, and then we can kind of have a conversation about, my stepdad or how she was growing up and how this recipe came to be and all this stuff. And so I think we wanted to carry that over into the sections in the game where, Giles is trying to reconnect with her parents because, they've been separated for a while. So this is just a way of getting closer to her mom, hopefully. But it's not always smooth during the cooking sequences. So.
I mean, it's a joint enterprise, right? It's doing something together, and sometimes it's easier to have a conversation when you're doing something together rather than if you just approach it head on, especially if it's going to be a difficult conversation. But I think there's kind of two elements to the reality of our experience that we put in. One is Jala's mom is incredibly judgmental about her cooking and extremely stingy with compliments and like very grudging about it, even though she's clearly loving it. And two, which, not at all drawn from any of our specific lives, if any of our moms are listening. And two, the other thing is that food in an immigrant household, I think, is just such an expression of love. And I think especially in Asian households, though I'm sure it's true in other immigrant cultures, that sometimes when it's difficult it's one of the love languages, Like I think I joked on Twitter about like how you're loved in an Asian household when you sit down and within 15 minutes a bowl of cut fruit appears beside you. And I think it's that, and of course I think a great part that I really love is getting to see recipes from cultures that belong to other members of the team that we're putting in the game, which I think is like really special. So it's not just about like South Asian cooking. It's kind of just about the enjoyment of food in general.
It's interesting that you're talking about like it's not just like one person's perspective that's coming into this game. It's like a lot of different perspectives that are coming in. What are some of the things that you learned while sort of like being on the team and like learned about other people's like families or like things that you were like, oh, I thought our family was the only one who did this. I thought we were the only one, or oh, I didn't know you did this. Like, what were some of the things that you learned from like your other, I guess, teammates, members of the dev group?
I think the most important thing that we're all agree on is shoes come off when you go in the house. So that's just like that is, if you're gonna work at outer loop, that is a must. So
it's just one of the unspoken.
Yeah.
I learned that the chancla is also like a very in Hispanic cultures. I hadn't known that before.
We didn't know that. Yeah.
Other specific things I learned about the rest of the team are just absolutely not fit for
that's okay. That's okay. You could keep that could be like the hidden items within the game itself.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting because obviously for the past couple of years, we've been in the middle of a pandemic that sort of kept people separated. And I know a lot of people, even on this call now, that we're all talking from like different time zones. So what has it been like, working remotely with everyone in order to make something like this work? I'll start with Sunny because you were sort of like having to pull all of these bits and pieces together in order to make the game happen.
I think it's been easier than you would think it is, and I think that comes from there being a lot of flexibility in what people are able to do. for me, this is my first job coming out of college. So I finished my last 2 years of my degree online. So for us, moving from being in groups in school to having to then deal with everybody online was kind of like the worst, most terrible experience because none of us were used to it. But then when it came to working at Outerloop, I found that that difficulty in terms of communicating to people over long distances doesn't really exist, because there's a lot of communication in Slack. A lot of people post like progress in Slack, like, oh, this is a thing. Does anybody have an opinion of this? We're sitting in a Discord call all day. So, if anybody has anything to say or has a question, you can just kind of pop your mic off and say, oh, can I have some help with this? Or what is the opinion on this? Or can we talk about this specific topic? And I feel just having those different modes of communication on top of being able to see what everybody's working on in like the form of like task tracking and all of that stuff actually makes it easy. And I feel like it's not restrictive on everybody, like on everybody on the team, because, you can dash off to like your grandma's piano recital, right? And be able to come back and there's still people working because they're working from a different part of the globe. So you're never really feeling like there's a specific time in which I'm supposed to be working, and you're never really feeling that like you're restricted into being like, I'm sitting at my desk from 9 until 5 p.m. or, like I cannot stand up and do something else. And I think that makes it a lot easier because people are able to still live a personal life, but at the same time put as much energy into this as, they're able to.
Yeah, that was a big part of starting the studio. Like I had previously, I just had a conversation with my son actually the other day about this, where I used to come home routinely like at midnight because we were just crunching on stuff, or it was like the and then the commute. And he's like, now I'm like, when we started Outerloop, I was like, I want to do it from home and have more flexible hours and keep, as long as folks know what they need to do, let them make their own schedule. And that has really worked well working, like Meghna and I will talk my 8 a.m. or her 8 p.m., or if she's in India, which she might be part of the year, then it's like, we'll figure out a schedule what that 13-hour difference is, and we'll chat.
You used to call your mom after you called me because she was in Sri Lanka.
Oh, yeah, and she was awake, so.
That's sweet.
So, like, I'm on the West Coast, and, Sunny's in Toronto on the East Coast, and, like, we have 2 women in Australia, and then UK, of course, where Meghna is, and then like East Coast, I think, and sometimes India. So like and then we have a effects artist. She's in China, so it's like there's like this, I think 17 hours from West Coast to wherever. So
the sun never sets on the outer loop.
Yeah. So it's like sometimes, so sometimes I'll do early thing, and then I'll take the afternoon off because I'm doing stuff with the family, and then like later at night I'll sit down with Wadey, our person in China, and just like catch her up. I think 4 p.m. West Coast is like the one time we'll do like our stand-up Mondays, which is hard for Meghna, but everybody else, I think we that's like the one time we can like chat. And we start the week with like just going around the room, or going around the world, I guess, and just saying what we're working on, and then we use that time to also just kind of chat and catch up from the week. Because like if you work in an office, you have like water cooler chats, and you walk by somebody's desk, and we don't really have that, so we try to make moments for those kind of things. And like on Thursdays, we'll try to just hang out and do like a social hour kind of thing, and but usually in between it's like Slack messaging and things like that. So
Sure.
But we try to keep it pretty flexible. Yeah.
Nice.
I think what's also really exciting is that it just opens up, the field of possibility for who you hire, and you can hire from all over the world, and you're opening up in terms of talent, in terms of diversity of, not just race, gender, but diversity of like perspective and geolocation, where you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really exciting. And I think that's partly what you see in like the amazing visual design of the game and its aesthetic. It's so built on all of that, I think.
Absolutely. To jump to another sort of bit that is also in the game. In the trailer, obviously, you were talking about like having to go through past relationships and sort of like find like a good ending to see where those exes go. But we also see not just men, but we also see women. What was sort of like the idea or the genesis of creating a bisexual main character?
Did we even really talk about it, or did we just do that? Because
I think you and I were talking. It was more like what, you know, like everything else in this game is like it's a sort of a culmination of what's on the team, you know, people on the team and their backgrounds and their preferences. So it's like we always thought like, why not? Because this is the team makeup is so diverse, and you know.
I mean, I'm a bisexual South Asian woman, so it kind of felt very normal to write that. I think maybe in the early days, we maybe were. I think maybe it was going to be one relationship, and it was going to be anyway. So I think
I think it was, well, initially the idea when we, you know, you and I were talking about it like 4 years ago, was a game about arranged marriage, and we're like, okay, if we're going to do arranged marriage and like more traditional South Asian story, then it's probably going to be, you know, just men for her. But then we kind of I mean, we should talk about that, because that is
absolutely because it's really interesting. Because also I think back in the day, like I got super interested. There's a subculture of people in India who are having marriages of convenience within arranged marriages, and it's something that queer people do. I mean, because of course queer people exist everywhere in the world and have always found ways to survive and subvert dominant culture, you know. And so I think when we sort of maybe started talking about this arranged marriage game, partly we started talking about it because neither of, you know, my parents didn't have an arranged marriage. I'm not married. I don't particularly believe in the institution. Ika didn't have an arranged marriage. So we kind of had come from cultures where that was very prevalent, but wasn't our experience. And I think we were really interested in exploring that in a kind of, I don't know, sociocultural sense.
Yeah, but I think the more we chatted about the arranged marriage stuff, it's just like it didn't feel like our story and our story to tell. So we're like, okay, and I think it was just like a brainstorm with the team, the idea of like the exes, and then a built-in sort of antagonistic quality because they've had these prior, you know, experience, and she's, you know, Jella had broke up with all of them, and so there's like there's a built-in sort of tension there, and Jala knows that, they know that, but the player doesn't. So there's like this whole component of how we, you know, show that in the course of the battle. Yeah.
I think that's always interesting, right? It's like rediscovery. It's in some ways, like it kind of mirrors, like, I think everyone has had the experience of sitting down with an ex many years later, and, you know, and they'll bring up something and you'll be like, that is not how it went down. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, that absolutely is how it went down. And you realize you had completely differing perspectives on something that you thought was just one story. And in some ways, like, Jala is having a rediscovery of what she thought was her past, and the player is discovering it for the first time. So that feels like quite narratively serendipitous, I think.
Yeah, just having that sort of the what is real, you know, my memory versus your memory, and you know, talking that through, especially with like Sergio's her third grade boyfriend. Like, so we start with
not even really her boyfriend in any.
Yeah, I mean he thinks
it's very important to him.
Yeah, so that's the first sort of like, oh, you know, we kind of go in this order, and that's the first one that, you know, as you come into town. Sergio already knows you're in town.
Oh God, Sergio.
Taking out that bus stop.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Sergio. Third grade is a long time ago.
He is lovable though. You'll find out when you see the game. So
people love him no matter how much of a dick I make him. So
yeah. For early playtest, people are like, "Oh, he's so wonderful." It's like, okay. I guess we'll get into that. Yeah,
and now Ritesh, who's doing the voice acting for the demo, he's so good and so funny and just really charming, and it's so terrible because he's making him even so much more attractive to people, and I don't think he should be.
how do you create these characters? Obviously, like you're talking about a character that you're like everyone should dislike him, but you've also made him likable at the same time. How do you get that both like tone and voice together so it's like it makes sense narratively in this world that the character would no longer be with this person, but the player still kind of digs them or at least understands why they are be like, oh, this third grade boyfriend, we should definitely not be with him, but he's great.
And the player, yeah. Go ahead.
No. I was gonna say, from the outside, it's a lot easier to like someone, it's a lot easier to like somebody else's ex than it is to like your own ex, first of all. But also, I think that's kind of important for us, right? I mean, I think as an entire kind of philosophy of how we approach the characters in the world, really, I think some of our watchwords that we talk about all the time are kind of sincerity and kind of respectfulness as well. That doesn't mean you can't make fun of people. That doesn't mean you can't be lighthearted about it. And there's a lot of silliness and absurdity and all of that. But fundamentally, we're not telling a story about evil people in an evil world. We're telling a story about, kind of messy, kind of dumb at times, kind of lovely, people who make mistakes, who are complicated and nuanced. And so it's really not about like villains and heroes as much as it is about just kind of people. I think that real sense of character, right, which really can only come about when you see people's both good sides and bad sides. And I think it's important for us for me writing it, for us designing it, for the art, animation, for the actor playing these characters, to find something true and likable and human about them, even if a player is gonna just be like, oh my god, this guy's an asshole. Yeah.
I mean, it's a story about characters in their mid-20s, 20 something, so we're getting a little mature in terms of sort of like the depth, the emotional depth, even though there's there's like characters throwing cars and taking their shirts off and going to their inner worlds and giant moms hitting you with slippers. There's moments of levity, but there's also moments of just like heartfelt moments. And I think with the visual style and the design and the animation and the stories we want to tell, like a story about messy characters, I don't think it really exists too often in games, especially in this kind of type of game. So I think that's where we like found the sort of the core of it, is like these are real characters. They're not necessarily like evil, like Megan was saying, evil or good, but they had their moments. Third grade is different than high school, than 20s. So it's like reflecting back on those and talking about those feelings at the time and resolving those feelings is sort of. I mean, I think that the resolution of things, of feelings and relationships, is sort of the core theme along all of these. So when we kind of start framing it that way, Sergio can't be a complete dick all the time, right? So neither can Jala, right? Like Jala just can't always pick, or the player can pick how to respond, flirt or insult, but like it comes back around and it resolves.
So you've released the trailer. You've gone to events, Tribeca currently, where people can get their hands on the game. What has been the response you've gotten from the audience about about the world, about the stories that you're telling?
I'm actually curious, Sunny, from your perspective, when we first came onto the project, what your thoughts are.
Geez, when I first came onto this project, I was immediately like, this is amazing. This is the most fantastic thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And it comes from like a level of things, right? Because as someone who grew up bisexual and kind of like in high school kind of struggled with it a lot, first of all, seeing like a bisexual female character was like, oh my goodness, yes, fantastic. I never get to do this in video games. If I like make the character female, they're going to force me into the track where I have to date only the male characters, and that's not what I want, right? So first of all, that was like amazing that I could like flirt with all of these hot people of all kinds of genders and varieties. And then also just the fact that it's so much all at once, but it doesn't feel like it's too much. A lot of people I've been seeing online are like, what is this game actually about? And they start trying to like list things, and then there's someone else finds like a new thing, right? And I think that that level of variety is what makes it interesting and what makes it something that people are really interested in playing, because you're not necessarily been squished into a specific genre, and things don't feel disjointed. It doesn't feel like you're playing 4 different games at once, which sometimes happens with things that combine many different types of mechanics. It kind of comes together and feels cohesive, and it makes it accessible to a broad range of people who have different interests in like different types of games, right? Because for example, my younger brother might not be a big fan of story games, but he loves skating, right? And that's a way to introduce him into this, and then he's going to be like, oh, the story is great, I enjoy the battles and all of that. So that's my perspective on it.
Sunny, I'm so curious. Sorry.
Go, please.
But I think because this is your first job in the games industry professionally, what is the experience of working on it internally, having your own feelings, and then having people respond to the trailer and having that discussion, or like listening to people do play tests, and how are you feeling about Tribeca, where people are actually going to be playing the first 20 minutes? Like, has that been difficult for you? Has it been fun? Do you cringe? Like, do you have good boundaries around it? Like, yeah.
I've started developing good boundaries about it, but I think about like the whole Game Award situation, and we were like sitting there, and I kept getting like more and more anxious, and at some point I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't take this. I have to go find my medication, otherwise I'm gonna like throw up.
I don't think that gets easier after even like I was same way. I don't know if I have any good boundaries around it. It's really like I read all the comments. I can't, like, I have to read everything.
That's a horrible truth, is that most of us do read all the comments. But like, how much you let it, but I think eventually, I think you have to develop some sense of like not letting it bother you, because especially, when you're in the, I've been around the kind of harassment cycle, like roundabout a few times, right? And that really does help you develop some of those boundaries, but it's hard when you care, I think, fundamentally, right? And when the work is personal and it means something to you. I'm almost afraid to be like, oh no, we read all the comments. I feel like that's giving certain segments of our audience too much power.
I read them. I don't necessarily react to all of them. It's just like, okay, I get where they're coming from, but that's fine. Like, I think I've internalized over the years, it's like, you're going to drive yourself all sorts of places where you don't want to be if you're just listening to every comments. But it's more interesting to see feedback just based on the trailer, what people think it is, like what Sunny was saying. So that helps us, like, in terms of like, what do we do next in terms of our trailer and gameplay, what should we show off, so that the anyone that has questions that we're answering.
A friend of mine, actually it's Kim Belair, on after our fires, we did a fireside at Lunaricon, and she was saying, like, please tell me, was the Yakuza an inspiration? And I was like, Yakuza is all Ika talks about. Yakuza likes. And like she really was like, I think that's gonna be a thing in the industry in the next few years. And I think she's really right.
When I pitched the game, it's like, it's a baby Yakuza game, right? It's like a smaller version of that, and what that means for people that haven't played it, it's like, it feels like a game that has things that are completely unrelated, all tied together with a nice narrative story, and that's sort of what we're trying to do. There's like a specific character and perspective, and Yakuza has 100 different things. We have 5 different things possibly, but like it's a baby version of that. So.
Just to go back to Sunny just real quick. So speaking about GGP real quickly, just what we're doing here. One of the things for GGP is that we help LGBTQ plus students get into game development, help to get internships, help to pay for school, for supplies, computers. Everyone got VR headsets last year. You are on this amazing project. This is huge for someone who's just coming out of school. What kind of advice do you have for other students who are in school right now or hoping to get into school to do something that you are doing right now?
No pressure, Sunny.
Yeah.
No pressure. I totally know what to say here. So I think the piece of advice that I would bring up, which is something that other people had to force me to do, and I think it's important, is that you might think to yourself that because, you're within the LGBT community, or, you're the marginalized identity, that because you've been so trained to believe that this is an industry full of straight white men, you're not going to fit in, they're going to kind of bully you and you're never going to be able to do this ever again. That's not the case. There's so many wonderful people in this industry, first of all, and second of all, if you don't see yourself in that space, make that space. Because when I first applied for this degree, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be like the only black person there, I'm going to be like the only LGBT person there, and it kind of stressed me out, and it kind of initially discouraged me from trying, until a friend of mine was like, you know what, it's something that you enjoy. It's something that, you're going to enjoy doing for the rest of your life. So why limit yourself because of the opinions of other people? And even when it came to this job, I got this, I managed to find this team because my boyfriend forced me into taking an opportunity that I thought that I didn't deserve.
Yeah.
And he told me that, as much as you think that you don't deserve it, do you think that, every other person out there sitting there being like, I don't deserve this, so I'm not going to do it? That's not the case. A lot of the people have, the confidence, especially a lot of people who have, established identities in this industry, have the confidence to be like, this might say 5 years of experience, but I only have 2, but I'm going to apply for it anyway. And I feel like as a person of color, and as, someone in the LGBT community, and as a woman, sometimes you discourage yourself from doing those things. So my piece of advice would be do that thing that you think is going to lead to you being not accepted, that you think is an impossibility, and it might just become a possibility. Don't count yourself out before you're actually counted out. And if you are counted out, make the space for yourself.
That was perfect. That was beautiful.
And the industry needs you, Sunny, much more than you need the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. True. This is very true, and I hope there are 100 more Sunnies.
There's only one Sunny.
There's only one that's Sunny.
Similar.
We have 100 more people like Sunny who reach out there and go for the jobs that they think they're not qualified for, because they're surely qualified, and probably even more so, in bringing in their own voice and their own expertise into the game industry, because we need it desperately right now. And
a lot of us marginalized folks really have each other's backs, I think, is another thing to really say, because I know Sunny was so right in pointing out, we talk about the difficulty, the abuse, the toxicity, and all of that so much, and it's important to talk about, but I never want that to discourage people coming in here, people we desperately need, people who have their dreams of coming in here to do that. And I think every person who's marginalized in the industry is keenly aware of wanting to kick that door further open for the next person.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience.
Yeah, that's been mine too. As someone that's an elder in the industry, I've been doing a lot more outreach for folks coming in and helping other teams. So.
Geriatric in the industry, practically.
I know, right? Retirement age. It's been really. I mean, I think as much as I dislike aspects of Twitter, it's been the place to connect with other marginalized folks around the world outside the U.S. And how we've hired, I think half our team is just through visible women and South Asian artists and different hashtags on Twitter that started a conversation and started chatting, and that's been sort of the one sort of equalizing platform that being able to talk to folks. And I get folks reach out to me all the time with like whether it's pitching or talk about their game or play testing and things like that. And that's been really, really good, or advice on what to do with schools and talking to certain publishers and things like that. So it's been the community is really, really friendly, and everybody is out there. I know Magna does a lot of that too, and helping.
Yeah, and if anyone means you, come to us, and I guess we'll sort that, right? Like, just a little anti-threat in there.
There you go. Oh, I love it. Okay, to wrap things up, what is any final words that you want to impart about the game, about your experience, about some to the audience who may be listening and wanting to be in the games industry, or just want more diversity, more good games in the world out there? What do you have to say to them?
I think, to an audience for games, I would say support indie creators and support marginalized creators, like the energy that a lot of us spend, asking for crumbs from Disney and Marvel, like put that into like supporting folks like us. And there's so many other like great indie creators, both commercial and non-commercial, who are doing, I think, like amazing, groundbreaking, representative, like boundary shifting work. And in our kind of, late capitalist hellscape with increased platformization and all of that stuff, I think, it's ever more important to have an audience and community support for things that are outside of the mainstream, and I think that's how things change.
Yeah, I think even with this project, it came about because we feel like there's like such an underserved community, right? And there's a lot of us and a lot of folks out there that would love a game like this, and we hope it inspires other folks to find those niches and things that they wanted, the stories that they're important to them, and make games about it. I think that's what's really great about the industry right now, and where people are going. I'm starting to see a lot more creators like just take chances on things, and that's the thing, is like, it's obviously the size of the team, but like we're a smaller team and a smaller budget and a smaller game, and the game doesn't have to be played by everybody. We don't have to cater to everybody for us to be successful in it, and I think that's the finding that balance is what we're trying to do. So.
I think the thing that I would kind of leave off on is from kind of my own perspective, growing up on video games and, not really playing a lot of indie games, because you kind of look at them and you think, oh, it's not going to be like the same quality, is something that my mum always says to me about everything. Don't knock it till you try it.
Ending on Sunny's mom's advice, I don't think we can top that.
No, that's exactly it.
There you go. If people want to find out more about the game, where can they go?
ThirstySuitors.com or at Outer Loop Games on Twitter. That's probably the place to go.
Excellent. Thank you all for being with us, and good luck with the game and everything that goes along with it.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you.